Hi, and welcome to the Feast of Israel for Christians. In Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 to 18, it says, when Jesus came to the area of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they answered, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." And he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "You are blessed, Simon, son of Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it." So, has anybody out there in cyberspace been to Caesarea Philippi? Because that's what it said when Jesus came to the area of Caesarea Philippi. He asked his disciples, "Who do men say I am?" Well, I've been there. And what happens is you're there, and I was there with the Bible-believing church. It wasn't my church. It was a Calvary Chapel from some place in upstate New Jersey. And I went with a friend and his wife, just the three of us, and we weren't affiliated with the Calvary Chapel at that point in time. But we heard about this trip, and it was like, oh yeah, let's go. I think it was 10 days in Israel. And so what he says is, he says to Peter, whose name's Simon, he says, your name is Petros, Peter. It's like a little rock, pebble. And then upon this rock, I'm going to build my church. What could he possibly have been talking about? A lot of scholars believe that he's saying that upon the confession of Peter, that's what how he would build his church. And that could be true. But the guy was standing, the pastor of this Calvary Chapel was standing here someplace, and he picked up a small rock and he did his little presentation, but he didn't look behind him at this enormous rock. And this goes up quite a bit. Now there's all these pathways, and some of them have deteriorated over time. This is in a place, it's called Caesarea Philippi, but the locals call it Banyan. It's a cult worship site for the god Pan. Up in these crevices up here are all kinds of goat god Pan statues and stuff, and there's little niches that you can go in and worship, and this horrible goat god. The locals there can't say the word P, so they call him Ban and Banyan. either Jesus was looking at this the whole time he was speaking, or the disciples were looking at this, but it's not much of a stretch to believe, and a lot of scholars believe this, that Jesus was saying that upon this horrible Gentile cult worship that goes throughout the world, and it's not just this one horrible god, but all the gods through all the time. Molech, who they were sacrificing children to at one point in time, and Zeus, Venus, all these horrible worldly gods who were already entrenched, not just in the Gentiles, but also, if you read the Old Testament, the children of Israel were worshiping false idols all the time. It's not much of a stretch to see Jesus going, upon this foundational rock. And that's what Petra is, like the city of Petra in Jordan. It's this rock facade with all these buildings carved into it. It's bedrock. Upon this bedrock, I'm going to spread my church. And what's he mean by the gates of Hades will not stand against it? Well, I didn't find a picture of that. But one of these little holes is a spring that eventually goes into the Jordan River. And it's believed to be a place where people or things, spirits, gods, went in and out from the underworld. And it was called the gate. So they're standing right there by the gate of Hades. And he's saying, and the gate of hell won't stand against it. So we celebrate different things than Jewish people, because our things are based on pagan rituals that were taken over by the church and were stolen, I think is a good word. This series of presentations is not to get you to celebrate Jewish feasts or to not celebrate our feasts. We just want to understand them, the Jewish feasts. We want to see Jesus in the Jewish feasts. And we also want you to become familiar with these feasts because you have Jewish friends and relatives who celebrate them, what they mean to you. Now, that being said, if any of them are interested, if they're curious about things like this, pass this on to them, because they'll learn too, even though they've been celebrating these their whole lives. So today, we're going to look at three things. We are going to look at the Jewish calendar. We're going to look at the three festival seasons. And we're going to look at regulations for Israel's appointed times. And that's the feasts. So we're going to be reading from the book of Leviticus. It's a good possibility that you're going to be doing it. So first up, we want to talk about the Jewish calendar. We use the Gregorian calendar, not the Jewish calendar. the Gregorian calendar is solar, and it takes about 365 and a quarter days for the Earth to go around the sun completely. So every 4 years, as we all know, we add a day. But what about the Jewish calendar? It is lunar. It takes the moon 2,954 days a year. So what they do is every 3 years, they add a month. Sounds like fun, huh? And we're not going to memorize the names of the months. We'll run into them as we're studying the festivals, but we're not going to go crazy. This isn't about memorizing a whole bunch of stuff and all that. It's about just understanding it at a rudimentary level. These, it would be 8 festivals in total. So the Jewish calendar, of course, there isn't just one Jewish calendar. There's 2 of them. There's the sacred Jewish calendar, and that starts in March or April usually, because every 3 years they're adding a month. And this commemorates the Exodus, when they left Egypt and wandered in the wilderness for 40 years on their way to the Holy Land. And then you have the civil calendar that starts in September or October, and it's the beginning of the agricultural season. And it starts when the early rains start, which allow plowing the month of October or November. So, let's look at 2 Bible passages. Exodus 23:14-17 says, 3 times in the year you must make a pilgrim feast to me. You are to observe the feast of unleavened bread. 7 days you must eat bread made without yeast, as I commanded you, at the appointed time of the month of Abib. For at that time you came out of Egypt. No one may appear before me empty-handed. You are also to observe the feast of harvest, the first fruits of your labors that you have sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you have gathered here, all your males will appear before the sovereign Lord. So 3 times a year, spread throughout the year, you have to come and you have to bring an offering. Now, we think of those offerings as going up in smoke, but they don't. You're donating meat, you're donating wheat, and you're donating wine and things like that to the priestly class, because they don't have an inheritance. God is their inheritance. So they have to be supported. So this does a couple of things. It causes everybody to come to Jerusalem to worship God. That's the most important thing. But secondarily, so that this can go on in perpetuity. So the next one is in Deuteronomy 16, verses 16 and 17. And it says, 3 times a year all your males must appear before the Lord your God in the place he chooses, for the feast of unleavened bread, the feast of weeks, and the feast of shelters. And they must not appear before him empty-handed. Every one of you must give as you are able, according to the blessing of the Lord your God, that he has given you. So, and I had written in here that unleavened bread, you have to be there for 7 days. And the Feast of Weeks And he reiterates, hey, bring gifts. Bring gifts for the priests. You know, just like we give at church, they give at church. So we'll be talking about this stuff in a couple minutes when we get to the book of Leviticus, chapter 23. So the three festival seasons of Israel are the Passover, or what they over, apparently is not mandatory, but it happens the day before unleavened bread. So it's really hard to miss the Passover and make it for unleavened bread. You just come a day early. So that's 8 days between them, Passover and unleavened bread. That is something that is a full moon, because remember, this is a lunar calendar. So it's a full moon holiday. When you show up at Passover and you look up at the sky, if it's sunset, the moon is coming up and it's full. Then so you have Passover and unleavened bread, and starting the second day of Passover, which is the first day of unleavened bread, you start something called the counting of the Omer. And that's first fruits, which was mentioned in those passages. Then the next one is what we call Pentecost, they call Shavuot. It's standalone. It's not multiple celebrations going on during a period of time. This is Pentecost. It's at the end of this counting of the Omer, 50 days after Passover. And we know that. We know that from reading the Bible, our Bible, that the Holy Spirit came down on Pentecost. It was 50 days after Passover. And then the third one is Tabernacles, or they call it Sukkot. And in Tabernacles, the first one that you celebrate is Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets. That's a new moon. That's the first of that's their New Year's. That's Happy New Year's. And it's a new moon because it's the first day of the month. Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement, and Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, which is on a full moon. So let's look at regulations for Israel's appointed times. And to do that, let's just read what God says. Leviticus 23, the Lord spoke to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, these are the Lord's appointed times, which you must proclaim as holy assemblies, my appointed times." And the first one he mentions is the Sabbath, and we'll be doing the Sabbath. And we'll be doing that in mid-January. First up is Hanukkah, and then the next one after that's going to be the Sabbath. 6 days' work may be done, but on the seventh day there must be a Sabbath of complete rest, a holy assembly. You must not do any work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord. Now we're going to talk about the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. These are the Lord's appointed times, holy assemblies, which you must proclaim at their appointed times. In the first month, so this is the holy month. In the first month, and I think it was Abib, although there's two different names for it, but like I said, we're not going to get into all that. On the 14th day of the month, at twilight, is a Passover offering to the Lord. Then on the 15th day of the same month will be the feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. On the first day there will be a holy assembly for you. You must not do any regular work. You must present a gift to the Lord for 7 days. And the seventh day is a holy assembly. You must not do any regular work. So this, we're going to continue part of the Passover season. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you enter the land that I am about to give you, and you gather in its harvest, then you must bring the sheaf of the first portion of your harvest to the priest, bringing in the sheaves. And he must wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for your benefit on the day after the Sabbath. And on the day after the Sabbath, the priest is to wave it. On the day you wave the sheaf, you must also offer a flawless yearling lamb for a burnt offering to the Lord, along with its grain offering, 2/10 of an ephah of choice wheat flour mixed with olive oil as a gift to the Lord, a soothing aroma, and its drink offering, 1/4 of a hin of wine. You must not eat bread, roasted grain, or fresh grain until this very day, until you bring the offering to your God. This is a perpetual statute throughout your generations in all the places where you live." So if you were Jewish and you were reading this, you would think, oh, by perpetual, it means we're supposed to still be doing this. Now the Feast of Weeks. And this is the counting of the Omer. And we're going to be doing this in mid-May of 2026. I may count the Omer. Once a day, you count off the day, and there'll be a scripture reading and stuff like that. But we'll see. It's a big commitment. Every day at sundown, I'm going to count the Omer. The Feast of Weeks. You must count for yourselves 7 weeks from the day after the Sabbath, from the day you bring the wave offering sheaf. They must be complete weeks. You must count 50 days until the day after the 7th Sabbath, and you must present a new grain offering to the Lord. From the places where you live, you must bring 2 loaves of bread for a wave offering. They must be made from 2/10 of an ephah of fine wheat flour, baked with yeast as first fruits to the Lord. Let's flip my page here. Along with the loaves of bread, you must also bring a bull and 2 rams. They are to be a burnt offering to the Lord, along with their grain offering and drink offerings, a gift of a soothing aroma to the Lord. You must also offer 1 male goat for a sin offering, and 2 yearling lambs for a peace offering. To wave them, the 2 lambs, along with the bread of the first fruits, as a wave offering before the Lord. They will be holy to the Lord for the priest. On this very day, you must proclaim an assembly. It is to be any regular work. This is a perpetual statute in all the places where you live throughout your generations. Once again, if you're Jewish, You live in Jacksonville, Florida, where I live. Well, it says forever, wherever you live, you're supposed to do this. When you gather in the harvest of your land, you must not completely harvest the corner of your field, and you must not gather up the gleanings of your harvest. You must leave them for the poor and the resident foreigner. I am the Lord your God. And they always had resident foreigners with them. Now we're going to look at the Feast of Trumpets, or Rosh Hashanah. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you must have a complete rest, a memorial announced by loud horn blasts." And they're talking about shofars, ram's horns. A holy assembly. You must not do any regular work, but you must present a gift to the Lord. And we're going to get into this in early September of 2026. We'll be doing this one, Rosh Hashanah. And now we'll look at Yom Kippur. The Lord spoke to Moses. The 10th day of this 7th month is the Day of Atonement. It is to be a holy assembly for you, and you must humble yourselves and present a gift to the Lord. You must not do any work on this particular day, because it is a day of atonement, to make atonement for yourselves before the Lord your God. And we'll be doing this in mid-September 2026. Drop my notes. Indeed, any person who does not behave with humility on this particular day will be cut off from his people. As for any person who does any work on this particular day, I will exterminate that person from the midst of his people. You must not do any work. This is a perpetual statute throughout your generations in all the places where you live. It is a Sabbath of complete rest for you, and you must humble yourselves on the 9th day of the month in the evening. From evening until evening, you must observe your Sabbath. And they take this so seriously that they actually fast. And I've done it a couple times. Fasted for Yom Kippur, along with some Jewish friends who were believers in Jesus. And now we'll take a look at Sukkot, tabernacles, they call it here, the Feast of Temporary Shelters. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, on the 15th day of the 7th month is the Feast of Shelters. For 7 days to the Lord. On the 1st day is a holy assembly. You must do no regular work. For 7 days you must present a gift to the Lord. On the 8th day there is to be a holy assembly for you, and you must present a gift to the Lord. It is a solemn assembly day. You must not do any regular work." So these 3 seasons, with 2 of them have other holidays surrounding them, and then one is standalone. If able, has to come to Jerusalem. But it also says for these things that wherever you live, you're supposed to keep doing them. And we're going to get into this one in late September 2026. So the height of the calendar is in next year. There'll be three teachings in the month of September. These are the appointed times of the Lord that you must proclaim as holy assemblies to present a gift to the Lord, burnt offering, grain offering, sacrifice, and drink offerings each day according to its regulation, besides the Sabbath of the Lord, and all your gifts, votive offerings and free will offerings, which you must give to the Lord. On the 15th day of the 7th month, when you gather in the produce of the land, you must celebrate a pilgrim festival of the Lord for 7 days. On the first day is a complete rest, and on the 8th day is complete rest. On the first day, you must take for yourselves branches from majestic trees, palm branches, branches of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and you must rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. This is a fascinating festival, a feast, celebration, holiday, whatever you want to call it. I can't wait to teach this one. You must celebrate it as a pilgrim festival to the Lord. For 7 days in the year. This is a perpetual statute throughout your generations. You must celebrate it in the 7th month. You must live in temporary shelters for 7 days. Every native citizen in Israel must live in shelters so that your future generations may know that I made the Israelites live in shelters when I brought them out from the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. And at Shalom Pizza in West Philadelphia, they actually make the sukkahs. Sukkahs are these little booths, these little makeshift lean-to kind of things. They make a giant one so that you can eat the kosher pizza in the sukkah outside and obey God's law. So Moses spoke to the Israelites about the appointed times of the Lord. So we just read the law. We read Exodus, Deuteronomy, and especially Leviticus. What the law says about the festivals of Israel. What did Jesus say about the law? In Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 and 18, it says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law. I have not come to abolish those things, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke of a letter will pass from the law until everything takes place." So he came to fulfill the law. Well, what does that mean? We know it doesn't mean abolish, but we think it means abolish. And I'll get to that in a second. At that time, we would have understood that to mean the correct interpretation of the law. He didn't come to abolish it. He came to correctly interpret it. There had been a lot of people interpreting it from the time that, Moses died and it was passed on. There were people interpreting it. Jesus is the author. See, we're quick to say, well, I'm not under the law. I'm under grace. But it's grace from what? Grace from making the sacrifices that were required by the law, because Jesus was the sacrifice, but the law is still the law. We can't just rob, cheat, and kill because we know Jesus. And we can't just rob, cheat, and kill because we can repent to Jesus. Say, "Oh, Lord, forgive me for robbing that bank." Doesn't work that way. Couldn't do that under the law either. The sacrifices were for unintended sins. And for us too. I mean, Jesus, his burden's lighter, but boy, oh boy, he says, oh, you heard you shouldn't kill somebody. You get mad at somebody. You might as well have killed him. You heard you weren't supposed to commit adultery? Just look at her the wrong way. Just do that. Because it's in your heart. It's in your heart. Now, Jesus and the disciples celebrated these festivals. There's two of them that we're going to do, and one is Purim and the other is Hanukkah, and they were happening when Jesus was walking the earth, but they weren't prescribed in the law. But these 3 festival seasons. You have to come there for at least part of each one of them. You have to be there. You have to do certain things. And so Jesus and his disciples, they celebrated these festivals. But hearkening back to Caesarea Philippi, we celebrate holidays based on festivals instituted by our ancestors, based on pagan practices, and that's okay, because the gates of hell won't overpower it. Even though what we celebrate, I don't mind people celebrating Halloween. I don't really celebrate it, but I don't mind people celebrating it, but hey. And we celebrate Christmas, even though it's probably based on some sort of a winter festival from pagan times. But it's okay, because I have Jesus in my heart. So we also don't have to celebrate their festivals, their holidays. But it will help us immeasurably if we understand them. And we can wind up finding Jesus in them. So, what comes up next? Hanukkah. Next week, we'll be doing an exposition on Hanukkah. It's extra biblical. It's the only one of these that doesn't come from the Bible. Unless you're a Catholic, it's in the Catholic Bible. And then, as I mentioned, in January, we're going to do the Sabbath, chapter 2. And then we'll have a lull for a little bit. And next March, we're going to celebrate Purim. And that's biblical, but it was initiated well after the law was initiated. Now, in closing, there's an old saying that sums up every Jewish holiday, and that is, they tried to kill us. We won. Let's eat. Every Jewish holiday is centered around God and food. So I'm going to share some recipes. There's none for this one, but everyone after this there will be. And why am I doing this? So you can share stuff to celebrate the holiday with your Jewish friends and family members. I'm picking recipes that you can make prior to the celebration and take with you to their home. There'll be a dessert or a side. Something that you don't even have to make enough for everybody. You just show up with some and go like, oh, I brought this. I brought some latkes. I brought some Hamantaschen. And you'll know what all these things are. So I'm using most of the recipes that I'm using are coming out of this Jewish holiday feast book, and it's very good. They're simple recipes. It has everything from simple sides and desserts that you can take with you, And in case you decide you want to host one, it has some main courses that you can have. And then I got this one on the right from the local library. This one here is a very good baking book. It's kind of over my pay grade. These are Hamandash in here, Haman's hats from Purim. And I try baking, but I suck. So this one has some delicious recipes in it. And now this one here is fascinating. It focuses on a Jewish Italian cuisine. So Jews first arrived in Rome in the 2nd century BC as emissaries of Judas Maccabee. And you're going to know next week when we study Hanukkah who Judas Maccabee was. It's different than, there's two kinds of Jews in the world. There's the Ashkenazi and the Sephardim. There's actually a third one, and it's them. They're called the Italkim, and they're older than the Ashkenazi and Sephardic diaspora. And then more Jews came in 70 AD after Rome conquered Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. And there's also Libyan Jews who started immigrating to Rome in 1967 because of oppression there. So Libya was a Roman territory. And so when they fled, they came to the mothership. They came to Rome. So this Fast and Festive Meals has some easy recipes. That's why they're fast, I guess. And Jewish Holiday Style has all kinds of cool stuff in it. You should get this book from your library or buy it. Like, get it from your library, and if you love it, and you will, buy it. Because if you have an interest in these things, you'll definitely have an interest in this book. This tells you how to make party favors, how to make Purim costumes. You can take matzah and make a vase out of it. I don't know how you can fill it with water. I guess you don't. You can make paper dreidels. You can make a sukkah. These are all words that you might or might not be familiar with, but you will be. And then finally, these are the two books that I'm basing a lot of these presentations on. This one here is by a believer. I don't even know if he's Jewish. He might mention it in there. And then this one is by a guy who's not a Christian. And it has a lot of insight into the Jewish holidays. So anyway, with that being said, shalom. Peace. See you next time.